Well, welcome to Steve Tees Off, brought to you by riversidegolf.ca. Ken Poirier and his team down in South Surrey. Have a look at them on the internet, but go and visit the store. Without Ken's support and Riverside Golf, this podcast would not be possible. Today, we are graced with the presence of a special guest that his name is John Jamieson. Welcome.
Thank you, Steve. It's great to be here.
You are you're a Canadian PGA member out of Quilchena.
That's correct, yeah.
And you came to my attention, which was pretty cool, when I had the winner of a tournament that you played in, and we started talking about hole-in-ones, and then he proceeded to tell me that you got an Albatross on a hole-in-one on a par-4.
Yeah, it was...
that was at the Dunes.
At the Dunes in Kamloops, that's correct. Okay. First round of the PGA of BC Assistance Championship. And, I think it really came out of the blue. And for people that have had a hole-in-one...
I have not.
Okay. Well, and what I'll say is, the key is not to think about the outcome of the shot. It's to think about making a good swing and picking the right target, hitting a committed shot, and not so much thinking about, okay, I'm going to try and hold this. You'll play in tournaments where there's a hole-in-one prize or win a car with a hole-in-one, and people can tense up. And I think the key is to pick a target, make a committed swing, and then the result is what the result is. And so, we come to the 14th hole. It's, about playing about 295. And, all I was thinking about was, let's knock it on and try and two-putt for birdie. I was playing well in the tournament. I'd kind of moved through the motions of the round. There were some good shots, some not so good shots. And at the time, it was just, okay, let's knock it on the green, try and make birdie. And it wasn't so much, wouldn't this be amazing if I made a hole-in-one? Uh-huh. And like I say, picking a target, just trying to bring it in off the right edge of the greenside bunker, being cognizant of, where not to miss it, kind of looking at, okay, I want to try and bring this in off the right edge of the bunker, going to land it short, and it'll finish on the green, and we'll have a putt for eagle. Not thinking, okay, let's try and make this. So,
could you see it go in?
Well,
or was it?
Yeah, we were a little below the level of the green. It was playing a little bit uphill. And I had a good friend in my group, Sheldon Slonsky, and as the ball's bouncing up to the green and rolling on, I go, well, guys, that looks really good. Mm-hmm. And he will say that he thinks that he saw it went in, or saw it go in from the tee. I is starting to get a little excited. Okay, well, that could be really good. Yeah. Which but never thinking that it's in until you get up to the green and it's, okay, I don't see the ball on the green. I don't see it in the rough. And,
So how long did it take you? This is the question. How long did it take you to look in the cup?
Well, usually it would be the last place that I would look. I think, I've never been one where I've gone there first. And, but on this shot, because, it was moving up to the green, when we saw it rolling on the green, it wasn't carrying a lot of speed. So in my head, I was thinking, okay, there's no way this is outside of 20 feet. And as we get to the back of the green, I don't see a ball on the fringe. I don't see anything on the green. And I'm like, there's no way that it's in the rough. And that's when I go take a look and as it's coming back, I just remember starting to nervously kind of laugh and you just that stunned disbelief of that it's actually gone in.
That is so huge. It is.
Oh, it was, and then Sheldon and Noah, they came running over and we started celebrating. I think the thing that because I've had I'm going to say 3.5 hole-in-ones because one of
Yeah.
them I was playing alone, which I've learned now to, fire away from the flagstick when I'm playing alone. But with this hole-in-one, it yeah, just that feeling of, kind of stunned disbelief and you just that joy of it's gone in. And I think when we were down on the tee, one of the reasons why I didn't necessarily think that it was in is because we had a twosome in front of us, and as they were walking to the next tee, there was no reaction from the twosome. So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, well, if this had gone in, there probably would have been, they would have been jumping up and down. So there was that little bit of a delayed reaction. And then when we started celebrating on the green, everybody else starts to know knows what's going on. So
that is one hell of an accomplishment. That is.
And we get to the 15th tee, and there's they're doing scoring. They're doing getting an intermediate record of our scores, and it's like, oh, you made the hole-in-one. Oh, that's so amazing. Did you see it go in? And that would be a question that I'd be answering for a lot longer. So it really was just an amazing
surreal.
event. Yeah, absolutely.
That's the term, surreal. When it's one thing on a par 3, but on a par 4, the expectation is, if you can hit the green, great.
Well, and the only negative was, well, I guess there are two negatives. The skins pot was the second day.
Okay.
So I missed out on $1,400. They'll come back to the end.
Sure.
It was, just.
Okay, well, we started with that, which we didn't really intend to, but it's such a big deal. Like, congratulations to you. That's fantastic, John. That was quite the story. Let's start, John, with your background in golf. Where were you born?
Yeah, I was born in northern BC, Fort St. John, to be specific.
Okay.
And I moved down to Squamish. Me and my family moved down in late 90s. I started playing golf summer of 2000, which, a good year with Tiger Woods kind of being on the, kind of in the peak of his dominance. And the first time I swung a club was at Sun River Resort in Oregon.
How old were you?
I was 7 years old.
Okay. And was it immediate, or was it one of those things that you just do as a kid and then you go back to it? Or
yeah, I think it was something that I did with my grandfather, and it was a bond that we created. There was definitely that, the family story is, we got out to the range. One of the mornings we were at the resort. There was another golfer warming up on the driving range, and he said, "Here, give this a try." He handed me his club. I took a few swings, and the word is future golfer. And so, as corny as the story sounds, I think there was that feeling of, and certainly the longer, within playing a couple of years, okay, this could be my sport. This could be, this is something that I can do that not everybody can do. And, there were certainly, the opportunity was provided to me to go a distance with it.
It was accessible.
Mm-hmm.
It was accessible. I have the same story. That my foray into golf, I grew up in Manitoba, and the only reason that my father started playing golf when he was older, and by older I mean he was in his 40s, and I was 8 years old, and we had a municipal golf course just outside of Winnipeg called John Bloomberg, 18-hole flat, like just wind blown. And I got signed up. I've told the story a lot, but I don't mind telling it because that's what got 10 lessons. You showed up for all 10, you got like $150 or $200 credit. And that's how I got my golf clubs. So a lot of times I would just be the only, they started out being maybe 7, 8 kids.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time, a lot of times I'd be the only one that would show up.
Well, and I think, because I grew up playing the Squamish golf course a lot, but also Glen Eagles, the little 9-holer in West Vancouver. And I think they had a very good junior night. They got a lot of people out. They would do, we would do match play events, and this would have been, I would have said that I'd been playing for 4 or 5 years at this point. I was probably 11 or 12. And I think there was the access to the course. There, certainly nowhere near as busy as some of today's courses.
That's the one thing that I talk about a lot is accessibility. It's very difficult as a young person to get out on a golf course. Sim golf is great. It is, but it's not a golf course. And to get a tee time, to be able to go out, I was fortunate enough growing up in southern Manitoba in Morden. I used to be able to golf with my dad all the time when he when I wasn't an asshole. You know what I mean? Like throwing a club or just, but we had accessibility. I could ride my bike there.
Yeah. And again, I think there were incentives to come back. You would make friends within the group, and if you had a KP, you'd win a sleeve of balls. Yeah. There was some, it wasn't there was resources put into junior golf, and I think that's not to say that there isn't the same, that there aren't resources put into junior golf today. I think the courses that were able to handle junior golf at the time, they are starting to be more scrutinized and with the land availability, you would look at a course and say, well, okay, is this making money? And it's like, we've gotten to a point where it's not people are looking at assets as monetary value, not necessarily as public benefit. So I think it's all the more important that we can preserve courses like, and Glen Eagles is in a good area, but I was out in Maple Ridge a couple weeks ago, and they have a great little 9-hole municipal course that has the potential of going away and not being, and so there's that. We want to make sure that we preserve these types of places because they're good. I don't want to say breeding grounds, but places for people to grow.
To be introduced to the game.
Yes.
Yeah. One of the issues, and this is an issue, and I've seen it. I used to live right across the street from Northview. I had a putting green in my backyard, a real putting green. It used to be, you could pop over there anytime, hit balls. You can't, they changed that a long time ago. You have to have a tee time. There's a bunch of caveats that are on there because there's, they've got 2 tracks. And I played that golf course. Like, I know that it's embedded in the back of my head because I played it so often. But and I live close to Morgan Creek. And that golf course, I started playing it when Wayne Vollmer used to work out of a little trailer.
Yeah.
A great golf course, but getting on that golf course is not only is it tough, it's super expensive. And so what I do, the majority of my golfing is down in the U.S. Like, I just pop across and I can. And I don't know if they have the same accessibility issues, but here we certainly, in the Lower Mainland, it's tough to get a tee time.
And I've certainly heard it said that Vancouver could support a number, 3 to 4 more golf courses. And that's certainly something that has come out of COVID and the post-COVID boom of golf, which I know we may want to talk about later on, but it is really interesting how, these places that had the time and had the availability in the tee sheet to support junior golf, some of those, it's a lot harder to justify, it's a lot harder to make the decision to protect those times.
Mm-hmm. And that's a valid comment in that, like, when you start talking about Ledgeview, they have a great junior program. Mm-hmm. when you're taking, you're getting, say, a $20 green fee compared to a $100 green fee. If it's all monetary, screw the junior. I'm gonna go with and the only way to get better is you have to play.
Mm-hmm.
It really is, and you have to have facilities.
Absolutely.
You just can't. And even to, like, I've been fortunate. I moved out here in 1994. I've done the, played Swanee set with Superstore bags in January, in the gale force winds, just to say I could. I've golfed on New Year's Day. This is the best place in the world to live in Canada if you want year round the ability to play golf. Now, will you see me out in the winter months? No, you won't. I can't. The body can't take it.
Well, and when I lived in Kingston, the remark I had to the members was, just because you can golf in January doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
And so, no, to that point, it's certainly, we can be a little more. I've become a little more selective, but I think it is still, that's when, if you are looking to get out and you have a bit more time to kind of hit some extra shots, you can get around on the course and kind of, play some different shots. You play in different conditions. It's certainly, you're definitely looking for the perfect day of an overcast morning, no frost delay, little rain, but there is a good opportunity, to look out for some of those days because you have a chance to, hit a couple extra putts, hit a couple of extra chips, as long as you're not holding up play for other people.
Let's get back, John, to your path to the game, path through the game. You finished up. Did you finish up high school in? You said Squamish.
So I went to school at Collingwood School in West Vancouver.
Okay.
I was on the golf team for 2 years.
Okay.
And then, at the time I was a 7 handicap. I had not considered college golf. I wasn't quite at that level. And when I went to Calgary for my undergrad, I didn't completely put the clubs away, but it was a summer activity. It wasn't something that I was thinking about while I was at U of C. And then when I came back to Vancouver after finishing my undergrad, I took a job at Golf Town. I worked as the receiver. I brought in the inventory, took care of the warranties, did a little bit of fittings and some sales. And that kind of reignited my love for the game. I was always an equipment guy. I always, found it interesting when a company would market different clubs to different segments of the golfing population. Okay, well, this is our 15 handicap iron, and it's like, well, what's a 15 handicap iron? But I always found I was interested with the new technology, and so the equipment side, was something that was big for me at the time. And then being around the game, being around players or people at Golf Town that enjoyed getting out and playing, kind of got me playing more and working on my game to a higher level. So I had some really good friends that came out of golf.
So you were working there. Then what happens?
Yeah. So after leaving Golf Town, I went and worked at Shaughnessy for a couple of years. I was in the back shop there. And I had I guess my golf story starts with a very brief 2-day career at Quilchena in the back shop. I started there in 2013. Very good of the head pro to, give me the opportunity, but there just weren't enough shifts that summer for me, and I had to eventually make a decision to find a different summer job. But on the basis of that, I got hired at Shaughnessy the next summer, and then after I left Golf Town in 2017, I went back to work at Shaughnessy in the back shop. It's a very front-facing role. you get to know the membership very well. You see a lot of the same people on a regular basis. I've always been someone that has, looked at relationships as, transactional sounds, can sound a little bit wrong, but I think the thing is that if you treat every member the same way and look for opportunities to, make their day, you don't necessarily go into the relationship thinking, okay, well, I'm going to get this out of the relationship. But you put yourself in a situation where if hockey tickets are being offered up by the member, oh, well, John's a good guy. So let's,
No, I get it. That's the way it works. But the thing is that you're certainly not going to see any of that if you're not a nice person.
Yeah.
You're a good person.
And there were opportunities to get out with some of the members as well. So, yeah.
So your path, so when did you say, well, listen, you know what? I want to become a PGA of Canada. I want to get certified.
Yeah. Well, my path is a little bit different from people that knew, much earlier on in their career. I had played college golf at Langlois. I had gotten my handicap down to scratch in the summer of 2020. And prior to COVID, I was looking at getting into the airline industry, not necessarily as a pilot. I was looking at, kind of route development, why aircraft fly to different locations, the marketing behind certain routes, the business decisions that go into acquiring new aircraft and choosing new destinations. So I was writing a blog at the time on the airline industry, and COVID really disrupted the industry. It was very difficult to get an idea or any kind of future thoughts on what the industry might do coming out of COVID. So, it's wrong to say that I backdoored into the industry, into the CPGA, but I thought about, okay, well, what skills do I have right now? I've got some background of club fitting, customer service at the golf course, some understanding of what to, expectations for a private club. And so I thought, okay, well, let me look and see about doing the PAT and or if there's a PAT exemption. And so in the fall of 2020, I applied for a PAT exemption.
What does PAT stand for?
So the PAT is the playability test.
Okay.
And it's to make sure that, the PGA, they set up these playability test dates and where you have to prove that you can play to a certain standard. There's a minimum standard that's set by the CPGA. And then I know with, you talk to Mark Strong about kind of the evolution of that. It's changed a little over time. We still want to make sure that members of the CPGA can uphold the standard, but there's less of a, you don't have to go and break 70 just to be a pro. That standard has changed over the years. And so I got an exemption through some of my college scores at Langlois, and I began looking at opportunities really Canada-wide for, an assistant pro, someplace that would, allow me to do a little bit of club fitting, to kind of take on the retail side of the operations, with a preference leaning towards a private facility, just because of my preference on creating relationships with members.
So were you looking right across Canada?
I was looking right across Canada. I ended up stumbling on Cataraqui Golf Club in Kingston, and right from the start with my interview with Ian Reston, the head professional, we really hit it off. We spent the first maybe 20 minutes of the interview talking about the blog that I had written on the airline industry. He had a lot of questions, because he had read my blog and looked at some of the posts, and it was a very it became a formal interview, and we went through all of the hiring questions, but it started out with creating this atmosphere of let's
It's a conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a conversation.
Yeah. And that was very different from other interviews that I'd gone through, and it was he didn't make me feel like I had to defend my experience in the golf industry, or you know, the star questions of what would you do in this situation. It was very, you know, we got to know each other as people first, which was made me feel very comfortable.
So you get the job there. How long before you find out that the Tragically Hip are members of the golf club?
Well, and you know, I hate to you know, bear the bad news, but I didn't listen to a lot of the Tragically Hip.
Oh, shit.
And so
Jesus.
the first time I met for coffee with Ian, he was like, "Oh, and you know, Gord Sinclair and Paul Langlois are members," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, yeah,
Really?
And Ian was like, "Yeah, they come into the office and you know, my first day we're meeting, and he was a you know, like most people his vintage, like, was a big Tragically Hip fan, and I guess it's coming out now, but I think what made it part of what made it easy to interact with them was that they were not, you know, it wasn't like I was meeting Tiger Woods.
Yeah.
There was a recognition of what they had done, but there wasn't the same starstruck nature. So
They were just guys.
yeah. And I think, you know, we were kind of talking about it, or you know, we, you know, the relationship that I built with Paul and Gord, it became very, like, yeah, let's sit down and have a beer, or let's, here, can I get you lunch?
So when did you start listening to their music?
Well, I have a few hip songs on my playlist,
But when the thing is that when you found that out, the fellow that you were interviewing, and then you find out that you must have, were you going, okay, well, I should maybe.
I put a few more songs on my playlist, you know, to try and to get.
It doesn't get more Canadiana than Kingston, Ontario, and the Tragically Hip.
And you know, Tragically Hip way down by the K-Rock Center, or whatever it's called now. And just, I think the love that and there are the members that aren't in their regular playing, you know, the regular golf group. They like, oh, you know, what's Paul like? What's Gord like? You know, because they're all members at the club, but for people that don't interact with them, there is still that, like, well, what are they like?
Yeah.
You know,
celebrities.
Yeah,
they're legitimate celebrities. They were huge,
but they're also down to earth, and they don't need to be pampered on. You know, it's funny. The people that were pampered on were more like the car salesmen, you know, and the financial advisors.
Of course.
But that's a, you know, separate topic.
So that was kind of an enduring stop in your career at that golf course.
It really was a great place to, you know, great starting point for my career in the industry, because you got to deal with a very diverse membership. You know, Kingston, obviously home of the Tragically Hip, but also home of a number of federal penitentiaries.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
Queen's University.
Yes.
So you got academics, but you've also got kind of,
it's got a lot of history.
It has a lot of history, and it has
history.
Like I say, you're interacting with you know, the members are looking for different things, and you have to be flexible to not price particular people out of the inventory that you're bringing in, or price people out of the events that you're putting on. So you really learn to, I guess, think think from an inclusive nature, because you're, prior to COVID, golf was on the decline, and you had to think, okay, well, how can we make sure that this doesn't alienate people, you know, groups of the membership?
So how long were you there for?
I was there for 4 years.
For 4 years.
Yeah.
That, you know, just the Tragically Hip playing. That's just like that. I love that. But that's like Kingston has got a lot of history, a lot of penitentiaries. You're right. It's just, the St. Lawrence Seaway is right there.
Well, and the course was a Stanley Thompson, so
Huh.
same designer that did Banff Springs.
Yeah.
So there was a history to the course. I think what was interesting is that it had, it had the thing about Cataraqui that was, really good for me was that it wanted to preserve a lot of things that had made it great in the past, and kind of they were at the same time they were looking at ways to evolve. So it was, the first year I was there, we had a toast to the Queen at men's night, or at men's closing,
And that it doesn't get more British than Kingston, and I could speak to that too, because I did spend a couple of summers working in Ottawa, and we used to make the trek down to Kingston. But I'll say that that was your first foray into Eastern Canada?
first foray into Eastern Canada,
That's
and
pretty
my
impressive.
first job as a professional. So
Well, that's pretty
It's a
impressive
really
that you went,
great spot.
like, that you went from the West Coast to, not, it wasn't the exact, but Kingston that's the belly of Canadiana right there.
Absolutely, and the quote I heard a lot was, well, most people go from Ontario to BC, not from BC to Ontario.
But you
But
did the opposite.
yeah, it was I think a great opportunity to see, the traditions and the history of golf in a different part of the country.
Mhm. Yeah. I can totally see that. Totally see that. So you come back. So you come back to the West Coast,
Mhm.
and where did you go when you came back from the West Coast?
Yeah, I was speaking with a friend of mine who now is part of the team I work with at Quilchena, John Vu, and we were talking about places to, at the time I was thinking about maybe moving to Alberta and looking at jobs in Calgary, and I had said, I was looking at, there's a job at Meadow Gardens, but I think I missed the window. And he's like, oh, because we were just having like a, nacho. We were sitting for having drinks and nachos at a bar. This was just after Christmas. And he's like, oh, well, here, let me call up Curtis. And he called up the director of golf while we were having drinks. And he said, hey, Curtis, I know you've closed the position, but I've got a great candidate, someone who I think would be a really good fit. And I really think you should give him a chance and reopen the position. At least, I'll get John to forward on his resume and his cover letter and his information. And when I met with Curtis and Craig at Meadow Gardens, it was I got a really good feel of what they were trying to bring to the course. Now, Meadow Gardens is a interesting facility. In its own right, there's a high amount of play. There are members, there's public, there's a lot of corporate events, and I think what we connected on was, that common goal of enhancing the member experience, but also recognizing that the club is supported by a lot of public revenue.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
It was a good place for me to work because I think I got a different perspective on the industry. I just lasted the 1 year, but I think it was an important step because I think if you only work in one environment, if you're only in the private club atmosphere, you risk losing perspective on other parts of the industry, or other sides of the other sides of the club.
So you stayed there for a year, and then when your next step was?
Yeah. So then at the end of last year, John again was talking about how there might be some changes coming at Quilchena, that there could be another opportunity. He had heard that I was looking at maybe moving on from Meadow Gardens, and we kind of had a talk earlier this year, I guess in January, about kind of the role that he was seeing for me at Quilchena. He wanted somebody to kind of take the lead on, men's events, men's night, kind of have a active presence within the membership. He had felt that the men's club needed could benefit from a new voice, or could benefit from I guess a different presence, different voice to kind of get to encourage people to come back to events. And so when I started in March this year, that was sort of the role that I began to take on, looking at a different side of the industry, looking at the tournament side, less on the retail side. I still do a little bit on the retail side, but really looking at Golf Genius and how we can run tournaments and get the members engaged in the scoring of events and the excitement of men's night, kind of reigniting that interest in men's night.
Have you done any in your whole career? Have you done teaching?
I do a little bit of teaching.
Do you now?
I still do. Yeah.
Okay.
I would say that it has the first experience that I had teaching when I was working in Kingston, and it was great because I said to the men's captain, he was looking at, we had gotten out for a round earlier in the year, and I noticed that he kept losing his drives to the right, and he had a bit of an unorthodox move. He would kind of pull the club towards his body. And, we in conversation, I said, well, maybe we can try and get the club out. Maybe let's see if we can set up a lesson and try and, get that club a little more in front of you, square up the club, make it easier to square up the club face. And the mistake I made when I went into that lesson was thinking, okay, well, let's try and get you to hit a draw. And he was like, well, the last thing I want is to hit a draw because I've had a punishing
duck hook.
Yeah. And so that was the first mistake that I made, is that I hadn't listened to what the student wanted to get out of the lesson. And he gave me some very constructive feedback. A little bit of it was sobering feedback, but it was good because it made me realize that I needed to listen to what the student wanted to get out of the lesson. And that I needed to, the second thing that I took from it was, if I'm trying to convey a feel, not everybody thinks the certain way. Not everybody responds to, keep the club face open or try and hold it off through impact. I've been a very field player for the majority of my career. And when I applied my own, swing thoughts, because I started playing left-handed when I was working in Kingston. And when I started applying my own swing thoughts to my left-handed swing, I was like, oh, nobody, how could anybody learn off of this? So I really had to look at, the technical side of teaching and learning, correct methods, with.
You got to listen to your student.
You have to listen to your student, and you have to be able to provide instruction that is, not subject to different interpretation. You don't try and make things simple. Let's get the club in this position. Let's have your posture in this position. Try and save the technical swing thoughts for the person that knows their own game better. But if you're teaching a beginner, you need to start slow.
Yeah. Golf is a game that, because it is a difficult game. Okay. It's not like you're just doing one thing. There's a lot of things going on, and it's very easy to get discouraged. It really is. And I'm fortunate, just through happenstance, got involved playing golf when I was young, but I played hockey, I played baseball, and we had great accessibility. And it was something that my dad had no problem paying for the junior golf membership because he knew where I was.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he just knew where I was, where I'd be. And, if I was hungry, just go eat and sign for it. And that's cool. I know where he is. And I couldn't think of a better place to be when I was a kid, in the summertime, than being out on the golf course. And got to remember back then, like in a small town like Morden, Manitoba, there was no driving range. Mm-hmm. You shagged your own balls. So I used to have an Adidas bag that I would carry with me with a ball shagger, like just picking up my own balls, and myself and my friend, we would just, and as the sun was going down, we'd go on the first hole, which was a dog leg left, par 5, and just work our way towards the green, with hitting balls.
Well, and I think, it's a situation where you're learning your own swing as you go.
Yeah.
You start to build some muscle memory. You start to develop your own feel. And I think, the other thing that I was fortunate to have a lot of when I was a junior golfer is I had a lot of time, and I could experiment with, I could try and hit different shots with the same club. Bryn Perry spoke at our spring education seminar, and he talked, he compared it to tennis, where, the tennis players have one racket and they can hit different shots with it. And, at the time, as long as you don't want to be necessarily goofing off, but like to try and hit a driver from one side of the range to the other, you learn how to impart curvature on the ball or to hit the ball different heights. And so I think, there's certainly a case of, and this is something that I've tried to bring into my teaching when I have students that see the game in the same way that I do. So what I mean by that is, I am left eye dominant and I play right-handed, and I see particular shots. I don't see a lot of straight shots. I see a lot of curvature. I see different trajectories. And, I'm very much a feel player. I can, I will change the position of the club at impact to try and impart curvature or spin on the ball. And it keeps me engaged. And I like to challenge, not all of my students, but the ones that are looking for, if I connect with them and we're on the same page in terms of, okay, I need to have a shot for this type of hole. Okay, well, let's go to the range. Let's look at a point at the end of the range. We want to do everything to keep the ball right of that point. Let's try and, how would you go about keeping the club face open? How would you go about hitting a fade? And kind of getting the student to think about what they might do to create that type of shot. Now, again, that instruction doesn't necessarily work for everybody, and that's partly why I began playing left-handed, to think about, okay, well, how would I go about...
How were you as a left-hand?
I'm... It's funny, my swing technically has a better look to it, but I don't quite have the muscle memory just yet.
That's interesting, because I grew up with a guy that was a couple of years older than me that was a scratch golfer, right-handed, and it wasn't until we got a club pro in Morden, and he switched him to left-handed, and he was a better player left-handed than he was right-handed, and the only reason he played right-handed is because his family didn't have a lot of money, and they bought a right-handed set of golf clubs.
And there were people that I knew in Kingston who had played cross-handed, which I kind of blew my mind. And people similar to your buddy that had only had access to right-handed clubs, but they shot left in hockey.
Yeah.
And
so that begs the question, though, on the tour. And it's not my imagination. There's more southpaws. There's more left-handed professional players now than there ever was. And my assumption on that is that it's not chastised anymore. It was, you didn't want to be left-handed. The only thing you wanted to be, the only thing good about a lefty was they were, put a hard ball in their hand. That was it. Coming from the left side, golfing, there was that stigma.
Absolutely. And I think what, I know there was, and maybe this can lead into our question, it was about kind of when I knew that this was the right industry for me, is I began working with a friend of mine. His dad is a sport vision optometrist, and we were looking at, the role that the eyes play in the golf swing. And, up to that point, I had never really thought too much about, why my swing was different or how I hit different shots. But, golf has been largely, as you say, like, we can count on one hand the number of left-handed major winners, Mickelson, Weir, Bob Charles, Bubba, there's not very many. And the left-handed swing, with Mike Weir, he was a hockey player.
Yeah.
And he famously sent a letter to Jack Nicklaus asking if he should switch to right-handed. And Jack was like, no. If you've got the feel left-handed, stick with it. And, in the same way that we see, a lot of left-handed shooters in the NHL, we don't see a lot of right shot defensemen.
I can tell you this. I found out that I was left-eye dominant. I'm right-handed, but I was left-eye dominant because I grew up in a family. My dad hunted and fishing. He worked really hard to try and get me into hunting, and you had to take hunter safety. And I was holding the gun on my right side and going over top of the barrel because I'm left-eye dominant. And I was missing targets like constantly. And it was to the point where I was almost in tears. And my dad said to me, he goes, what hand do you shoot with? Because he'd just drop me off. And with your 22, you go down to the shooting range in the basement of the school. And he said, well, I shoot with my left hand.
Yeah.
I went, really? But you're right-handed. He goes, yeah, but I've always shot a gun left-handed. He goes, you're going like this. So he goes, okay, what eye are you? But you're a strong eye. You're left-handed.
And it was
left eye dominant, right-handed.
And if you pardon the pun, it was such an eye-opening moment when we talked about this because, I had a friend when I was in Calgary, and he was a bowman, and we went down to the target center or whatever, and he had a few targets, and they set me up with a bow, and the same thing. I was like, well, I've always pulled it back with my right hand, but they made me look through a target to see how I would, which eye I used to focus on objects. And it's like, oh, you're left-handed. We got to give you a left-handed bow. Yeah. And it was very different pulling the string back with my left hand. I did not have a lot of strength built up with that hand. And so it made, when I began talking with Richard Hughes, the optometrist, about eyes and the role of eye dominance in golf, it was really the first time that I had thought about, where we might see, where differences could emerge with, with ball position, with feel, with confidence. We talk about golf being a demoralizing sport. Like, this is a swear word almost in golf, but if you shank 5 balls into the hazard, like, why would you want to continue? You're gonna feel like, okay, I can't. Shit. Yeah. And so it really became a very interesting. It led to a couple of articles that got published in Golf Digest Ireland. It led to a number of studies. This kind of. I initially I came in because I was a friend of, Richard's son, Colin, and I used to work at Shaughnessy, and we would, Colin was maybe a +1 or +2, but he had struggled to, he had hit a ceiling with his game and with instruction, and would have these debilitating, rounds with his driver where he would not be able to get the ball in play. And, I said, well, come on, it's not that hard. Just like put it, tee it down and get it out there, not realizing that he and I were seeing the ball in very different ways.
Well, I'll tell you, I have a story, just a brief. I had eye surgery a number of years ago, and my eyes slowly got worse. Mm-hmm. So I had glasses, and I used to wear progressives. Mm-hmm. And I'm at the optometrist. This is like about 4 years. My golf game went for shit. Like, it went for shit when I got the glasses back. And I was I was topping the ball, like doing all kinds of stupid shit that I normally would never do in a million years. Never in a million. And I'm at the optometrist, and he says to me, he goes, you never ever told me you had eye surgery. And I go, well, and this is a plug out to London Eye Center. You have a lifetime warranty on that. You know that, right? And I said, oh. And I said, would these progressives, would they affect your golf swing? He goes, hell yeah.
Yeah.
You should never play golf with progressives. And I went, I never knew that. Like, I never knew that, because I did not know that. No. And so I go, Jesus, that explains a lot of stuff. Like I was ready to throw it in
Yeah.
because
People are,
you know. And then I went to London Play. Now I need reading glasses. This is what I need, but that's just an age thing.
and I think the thing that I took away from even just the initial conversations that we had about, the role of the eyes, and I would never pretend to say, to know, I'd never pretend that I know either everything about the golf swing or certainly not everything about the eyes, but we would begin to notice patterns. Richard would tell me that most of the dominant athletes in their field of sport have one strong eye, and that if you had some form of eye surgery or some form of, discrepancy in one of your eyes, that it could really impact, the sports that you play.
Yeah.
And when we began talking about it, like I have always been a strong left eye dominant golfer. I have always used my left eye to focus on objects. And
that's how you look down when you come up to a fairway. I'm the same. I'm like this, and I'm visualizing.
And we got talking about putting, because the same head pro that I worked for in Kingston, he golf's left-handed, but he putts right-handed.
Yeah.
Why do people do that? And I think it was, again, we could probably talk about this for a long time. Golf is a funny sport in that as soon as an instructor comes out with a new method of teaching, this is the way, this is everything that has been taught in the past, it's been, this is the correct way. Now we were wrong before, but this is correct. And
it's nuanced. It works. What works and that's the beauty of the game is that it's nuanced. Like the number one golfer in the world right now. Is that a swing that you would emulate?
No,
Nobody would.
Not.
Nobody would. But the thing is it works.
Absolutely. And yet when I play left-handed and I, take some swings, I can see how if you're transferring all of your weight to your front side, which is what Scheffler does when he has his right leg kind of flow
It's
behind
like
him. Well, yeah. And like he is transferring all of his weight from the trail side to the front side.
And nobody screwed with that though.
No.
When he was a kid. So he's just, it's just.
And I think it really makes it's an interesting conversation about golf instruction, because, the message that we wanted to try and get out with, with eye dominance is that if you don't kind of pre-screen your students and find out where they see the ball or how they see things naturally, you could be giving them some really bad information, some really bad drills.
Yeah.
And throwing off their game. Like I would certainly say that golf instruction has evolved over the past 30, 40 years. It is not just the same, instruction that was being taught, by Jack Nicklaus or Arnold Palmer. But there's, we look at people like Scheffler, Matt Wolff, John Rahm has a particularly short backswing. And, we can say now that there's a lot of different ways, a lot of correct ways to swing the golf. So
there's total nuance to it.
Again, with this topic, I think it's really interesting to see how, kind of what the future of instruction, where that will lead to is, we would like to think that this will become a part of golf instruction, not to eliminate any drills or swing tips or thoughts that have been done in the past, but to, streamline the process of recommending particular swing thoughts or drills. Like, okay, you're struggling with this. Well, let's try this because you're a type 1 or type 2 player.
Yeah. Let's get on to what's the funniest thing, the craziest thing you've seen on the golf course?
Well, this is and
let's hear this one.
Fortunately, I think the statute of limitations has ended on this, and it sounds very dramatic, but and also for the person involved, I'm going to keep their name out of it. But this was at Quilchena a number of years ago, and me and my friend, we were playing a match. We were on the 13th hole, and he had lost the ball in the previous hole, and he pulled a fresh ball out of his bag, and this golf ball had it was a personalized Pro V1. that said, property of so and so, and it had the phone number on the golf ball. And at this hole at Quilchena, there's houses down the left side, and actually, I guess it would have been the 11th hole for the story.
Yeah.
And he double crosses it and hooks it into the houses, and he starts laughing, and it's like we realize that he's hit the ball that says property of so and so.
That's where the guy lived.
Well, no. We thought, okay, if there's any damage, because it wasn't my friend's golf ball. It was just one that he had found that had a different name on it. And we thought, oh, if there's any damage, they're going to call the number.
That'd be
funny. I didn't play there that day. How did how did my golf ball end up in your front window?
That's funny.
So that was a good one. And the same player, different round. We were on, one of the par-4 tees. It was very, kind of one of those days we were talking about in the winter where, really wet ground and soft conditions. And he pulled out his 3-wood and put the ball just right on the grass. And I was watching from behind, and he made his swing, and the ball made a funny sound, and it just plugged right into the ground. And he's holding the finish, looking at it in the distance. And I have that wonderful few seconds of I get to see him looking at the ball, looking for the ball in the distance, while realizing that it's
in the ground,
been embedded into the ground. And so those were definitely some of the funnier things I've seen.
Listen, John, on that note, we're going to have to wrap things up. Shout out to, are you on Instagram?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. My handle is The Aviator.
Okay. Back
to my days when I was a blogger in the airline industry. It's EHVIATOR.
Okay.
And then my email at Quilchena, jjameson@qgolfclub.ca. And
listen, man, John, it's been a real pleasure. I appreciate you coming out.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, this has been.
And the Albatross was cool too. Listen, and the Tragically Hip story was cool. Even better.
Thank you. No, this has been a real pleasure.
Real fun. Really enjoyed it. And thanks again to riversidegolf.ca for sponsoring this fine podcast. They're the reason that we're able to do this and talk about golf in the Lower Mainland and British Columbia. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.